So a client of mine got broken up within the first few months of dating this woman who he deeply loved. And he's a successful guy, made good money, is constantly hunting promotion, constantly chasing excellence, has tons of hobbies, is an interesting person to speak to. And more importantly, he's done more self-development work than most people have ever done and will ever do in their life. And it still wasn't enough. As you can tell, this was extremely frustrating for him. We'll call him John for the sake of this video. And what happened with John is a textbook example of what happens with people who have been in a self-development journey a long time, but still haven't fully figured out relationships. So they keep on getting broken up with, sometimes cheated on, all this kind of stuff. But what John did as we were working together is he used it as an opportunity to change. Real change, not fake behaviors. Anything less, and a woman like this would have sniffed it out. And in case you hadn't guessed it, he was able to get his ex back with this method. Because my client had changed so fundamentally, the relationship itself had also changed. It wasn't the same blind spots, there wasn't the same triggers. He was actually a fully different relationship, one that was much stronger than the first. So the first relationship was constant boundary tests, constantly feeling like John had to put on a performance, constantly feeling like John had to perform to get validation from the other person because he didn't feel good enough in himself, in his own skin. And this was all due to old conditioning around in dating groups, masculinity groups, and self-help since a teenager. And this method that I'm about to show to you is exactly how he didn't fall into that trap and actually use this opportunity to better himself and then better the relationship, so that when he did get his ex back, the relationship was also better. Here's the table of contents. There's the good, the bad, and the ugly. Number 2 is taking a break. Number 3 is unconscious and conscious mind healing, learning, and growing. 4 is embodiment of change into the real world, honest signals. 5 is the aftermath and the action protocols that I have for you at the end of this video. So the good, the bad, and the ugly is to always remember that there's a kernel of truth in every single perspective, okay? Sometimes it might be extremely small. Sometimes it might not be truth, but sometimes it might be truth in the way that somebody views the world. It might be a truth in them identifying a problem, but then misidentifying how to solve that. Could be any number of things. There's probably more, however, than a few kernels of truth in the perspective of the woman that you deeply loved and that you were in a relationship with for maybe 1, 2, 5, or 10 years plus. You have to look at all of it, okay? All of it, no matter how confronting, path of most resistance always. For those of you that can't remember what the path of most resistance is, then I'll say it right now. It's whatever's the most difficult, whatever's the most boring, whatever is the most intimidating, okay? So what this includes is having a big break, or not having a big break, that's the next part, but really mapping out what specifically happened in the relationship. Really, ask her. You can even ask her. That's maybe intimidating, or it might be something that's a little bit difficult depending on how badly the relationship went. But you want to essentially map out everything about this relationship, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And only then will you have a full picture of what actually happened, okay? And only when you have a full bird's eye picture of what actually happened can you give a really honest assessment of yourself, so that you can become the person, become the man that doesn't get affected by these types of relationship issues anymore. Even if they're toxic, you'll have a lot of value by asking them. Even if they're toxic, you'll have a lot of value by evaluating what actually happened in the relationship. However, if they are toxic, why are you trying to get them back? So, like John, who I mentioned earlier in the intro, I was coaching him the whole way when he was going into this relationship and when he was coming out of it, and then eventually when they got back together again. So we already had all of this. This was done on autopilot for him. And in his situation, we were able to identify what went wrong specifically. It was around boundaries. It was about seeking validation a bit too much. It was around kind of letting the other person have an unfair proportion of what the relationship's issues were in terms of what they wanted to do. It's kind of like a little bit of the energy of being a rolling over and being a little bit of a doormat. Not all like that. Remember, we're not talking in absolutes here. There was just a bit of that energy, and that's all that's required. Sometimes it's just a bit of that energy which turns people off from us. Because if we're a doormat and we can't really stand up for ourselves, then how can we stand up for somebody else? If we're a man, how can we stand up for the woman in the relationship? Or even in social contexts or professional contexts, if we're the type of person that folds under pressure very easily, then there's a level of trust which we just can't achieve. So this leads to the second part of this framework, which is taking a break. At least 1 month, completely off for 2 and 3 months. This isn't taking a break from trying to get her back again. This is taking a break in terms of just dating, okay? I always say, as soon as somebody breaks up with you, that's it, they're gone. Because if you don't say that, then everything that you do will subtly be trying to win her back, will subtly be trying to get her validation, we'll be doing stuff with the express purpose of trying to get the relationship back. The whole point of this is remember it as being like, okay, first point is see the good, the bad, and the ugly, get all of the honest feedback we can. The second part is taking a break so we can actually be the person that we want to be, so that we can explore ourselves a bit more, so that we can be who we want to be. So we're doing things without the shadow, without the confines of the relationship of this other person hanging over our head. This also includes porn. I recommend that you take porn off for good, forever, okay? This is a time for you to get back in touch with yourself. This is where you do what you want to do and what you like to do, what you're interested in doing, how you want to operate when you're on your own, okay? How are you when you're not in a relationship? For some people, it might have been a few years, right? It might have been such a long time that you forget what it's kind of like to be by yourself. And it's easy to lose yourself in the relationship and to lose yourself in love, like it was with John. He needed to see himself outside of the relationship, realize who he was, stand on his own 2 feet, okay? It also fits with the first point because this is the time where you do your reflections on the good, the bad, and the ugly. You let your unconscious mind draw the connections, you de-stress, and you have fun. This is how change is actually made. It's made in something called the creative faculty. I guess you could call this like the right brain hemisphere, although that phrasing is slightly out of date. We want to give ourselves a space of not obsessing over the relationship, not obsessing over the person. This is why when somebody breaks up with somebody and I'm coaching them, I say, that's it, they're gone, let's move on. Because that enables this process to happen faster. It enables us to detangle, to draw connections, to see what are the honest areas that we need to work on, okay? Also, it gives us the opportunity to ask ourselves the question, who did our ex need us to be? Doesn't mean we have to be that person, but it's a good data point to see what was actually affecting the other person. So we can get out of our own struggles and we can say, oh, okay, I can actually understand why that person broke up with me. Because understanding is the first step to actually changing fundamentally as a person. And this is where we get into the good stuff. This is the unconscious and the conscious work. This is everything that is covered in my one-on-one coaching, and the unconscious framework as a DIY, do-it-yourself, is in my free product in the comment and the link below. It's my shadow work product. It's done on a live stream with my one-on-one clients. Go ahead and download it. It gives the entire system of unconscious transformational breakthrough there for free. And I'll send you a follow-up email, so look out for that. And that'll be us going back and forth in the email, just making sure you have everything that you need, possibly even answering a few questions, doing a bit of extra customer service that way. So this is when we start to ask ourselves the questions. With John, me and him, we worked together on this, so he didn't have to ask himself these questions. It was, what frameworks were we lacking? This isn't another mental model or cognitive model that we're trying to integrate and become more headied and less embodied. This is a framework to embody. Maybe it's the framework of the 7 layers of relaxation, which make us grounded. Maybe it's the concept of compassionate transparency, being a bit more polarizing while still being extremely, extremely warm. Maybe it's the framework of communication styles. This is the DISC model. One of the most effective communication models when it comes to sales or conflict management. Because if we speak to somebody in a language which they find aggressive or they find too passive, then that automatically creates tension in the relationship that doesn't need to be there. Maybe it's a presence thing. There was something, well, in John's case, it was definitely a presence thing. They were still looking for the other person for validation. There was still a putting on the pedestal of the feminine, of this woman, of a beautiful woman, of relationship, of sex, of sexuality, all of that kind of stuff, which made him not be able to show up as the man that his ex needed him to be. And the other part is what insecurities are holding us back and distorting our perceptions at the time. With John, it was the perception that he had to prove her value, his value to her. And it wasn't just to her. It wasn't like she was doing anything bad. This was to all women that he had been with, right? And that was something that we really, really had to go deep into. Again, that's why I made my free shadow work guide. There's also unplugging from validation, tapping into our polarity, our masculine polarity, rather than having us feel like we have to do all of these mental frameworks and models, like look people in the eye or act confident or be this charismatic person, right? I'm not trying to shit on those things, but I am kind of, because that stuff is so surface level and it never gets us out of the paradigm of doing. We always feel like we have to act like that guy rather than us just becoming and being that guy. That's why people who do all this confidence and charisma stuff, right? It looks good on camera and it looks good as like a 4-point program and it looks good in the movies where people do 1,000 different takes and they act a certain way. But when they come up in a real embodied situation, like a nightclub in Latin America, like being around people that are that guy and they're going to test your frame playfully. And if you're just learning how to do the right techniques and frameworks, you're just going to get clowned on by those people because there's no embodiment there, right? We need to actually be that guy that can be in a loving relationship effortlessly and manage all of the chaos that comes his way from a place of peace, from a place of total, unabashed, unashamed love and grounded leadership. With the practices of leadership, of compassion, of ballistic energy, and total equanimity, we can cultivate these states to fundamentally change ourselves as a person. Plus, the shadow work is there to iron out all of the things that are holding us back from naturally having those things, as well as all of the insecurities that are making us act in a certain way, right? So there's no more self-sabotage, there's no more analysis paralysis, there's no more nice guy syndrome, there's no more overthinking about what to say to not rock the boat or to say the perfect thing in order to get the good response out of somebody else so we can pat ourselves on the back and get all that positive validation. These are all things that John was struggling with. So all of this stuff that we worked on made John show up in a totally different way than before, much different. People respected him more, women gave him more attention, and he intrinsically felt more like that guy without having to do anything. And it was a gradual process. Let me not try and oversell it, right? But it was one of those processes, rather than there being a moment where it all clicked, it was 2 months later he woke up and found out that he wasn't doing any of these behaviors. It's a mixture of the unconscious work and it's a mixture of the conscious work. I have a ton of videos detailing that. I have a video on validation, which I recommend you to go and look at, the relaxation and compassionate transparency, cultivating all of the states. I have a ton of videos on cultivating states like metta. I have a ton of videos on shadow work. I have the free shadow work guide. Go ahead, download it, do all of your reading, send me an email, ask me any questions. I'm there to help you. This leads us to the next part, which is embodied difference. To cut a long story short, John and his ex got back together. And they're still together. How? Well, all this time, they went to the same hobby, which was like an improv class, basically. And I gave explicit instructions to John to not initiate anything, to just be cordial, be polite, obviously, but not engage anything further. Remember, the framework that we have is we're not getting her back. We're using this as an amazing opportunity to grow. We're not getting her back. And like I alluded to first, there's a strategy behind that, but it has to come from a genuine place of we want to improve, not we're improving for the other person so they can give us a pat on the back and tell us that we're a good boy. And also, he has to respect her decision. She decided to break up, right? We don't want to try and be the person that was always trying to convince and put pressure on somebody else. And if she was to fold to that, what kind of relationship would that be? It wouldn't be very good, you know? But like I said, my actual logic was slightly different. There was a strategy in place if something happened. I also knew what was going to happen if we did these practices and we hammered on them, which we did, because otherwise all changes we made would be subconsciously coming from the frame to get back the ex's validation, which is not something that we wanted to reinforce. And with this improv class, this was almost like the cheat, which is why if you are trying to do this strategy, there has to be organic ways that you have to see each other again, right? The most effective way. There's also other ways to do it. It started out subtle, but it became clear and clear that his ex started to become more attracted to him and started to fall in love with him again. Because when you go to the same place and you're being cordial and polite and you're not trying to impress somebody else, what you do is you give off a thing called honest signals. Honest signals are when somebody looks at you and you just are that guy, that person, because you're not paying attention to them. You don't notice that they're looking at you. And you're just being somebody who maybe they find valuable or attractive or worthy, whatever ideas people project on you, right? And it's an honest signal because there's no way that you could be faking it because you don't even know that they're evaluating you in that way. That's what honest signals are. This is the thing that those guys that are just attractive or are just social, are just confident, these are the things that they give off. Whereas the guys who have been in self-help or self-development for a while and are still seen as cool and successful, it's the thing that they're missing because they're always doing something. And there's a subtle energy of doing that a lot of people over time will pick up on. You can fool people. And a lot of these guys aren't trying to fool people. It's just a framework that they have. But because they're not fundamentally that person, it means they're having to do something. And they can't trust themselves to be that person who just is cool and normal, right? And she began to see this change with her own eyes. Started, like I said, it started out subtle, and then her interest in him grew, and then it soared, and then it became so obvious and undeniable. She reconnected with him, started giving him signs, making every opportunity to make conversation with him and to kind of push things a little bit forward, right? And John, after talking about it with me, then accepted her choosing signals. I said, okay, let's get back together. And now, this is the beauty of this method. Because he went with this method, not the tactics, techniques, all that kind of bullshit, right? The relationship is fundamentally different. See, this is the litmus test. A lot of guys maybe can trick their way back into a relationship, but then the relationship just goes through all the old patterns, goes through all the old bullshit, goes through all the old triggers and all that kind of stuff, because fundamentally he's still the same person. Or she's still the same person, right? Which means the relationship will still be the same. But because he's different, the relationship is different. Doesn't have the same blind spots. There's nowhere near as amount of the same conflicts. When they do have a conflict, they are able to get over it much, much faster and much, much better. He's not sucking up for her validation. He's comfortable in his own skin and his own groundedness. And thus there's less of a needy energy and the relationship becomes interdependent rather than codependent because he actually did a transformational process. He didn't just do the techniques and tactics and behaviors of somebody who was that guy. He actually became that guy. So, action protocols for everyone here. Download my free shadow work program. Watch out for my unautomated second email. Make sure that you do these practices. Get stuck into the email. Ask me questions. I'm there as a resource. I'm there to help you. Free bespoke pointers. My clients that do the best are always people who are proactive, active about their learning, asking questions, not ashamed to ask questions. Free, take the videos, the principles of the video out and apply them to your own situation. Because it's a bit more do it yourself, this is a video which is obviously for a lot of different people. You have to do a bit of homework to make sure that you can apply the different principles and lessons to your own situations. Don't take it at face value. And 4, allow yourself the space, the time and the energy to do the work and then add the strategy. See where your X and your world overlap and allow the honest signals that we talked about in this video to do the rest of the work for you. Very warmly, Aaron.